What does it mean to lead with a courageous heart and a human heart in medicine today? Today, we're talking with two wonderful human beings in neurosurgeons about their chapters in our Stand Up for Doctors White Coats book series, drawn from their personal experiences and from their own books. If you're a doctor, healthcare leader, patient, you belong here. I'm Kim Downey, and this is Stand Up for Doctors Conversations at the Intersection of Connection, Courage, and the Future of Healthcare. This episode is sponsored by Brian Case at Direct Wealth Care, helping physicians navigate the financial stress no one talks about in medicine with conflict free tools and resources. And I'm thrilled to welcome back Dr. Mark McLaughlin and Dr. Tony Avellino. Thanks for joining us today, Mark and Tony.
Great to be here, Kim.
It's a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much. By way of a very brief introduction, Dr. Mark McLaughlin is a neurosurgeon, speaker, and author, connecting people with purpose and inspiring patients, athletes, leaders, and doctors through service. And Dr. Tony Avellino is a pediatric neurosurgeon, physician executive, and author, focusing on health, wellness, and safety. And I would like you both to share what you'd most like our audience to know about you as we begin our conversation. And feel free to include your hobbies, which I know you're passionate about, and the titles of your own book. Mark, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can sum it up very briefly. I'm a wrestling coach trapped in a neurosurgeon's body. I was a wrestler at a young age and fell in love with the sport and went on through high school and college wrestling and fortunately was able to stick to the books enough to get into medical school. And throughout my medical career, I continued to coach youth wrestling and started a nonprofit called Trenton Youth Wrestling and Learning Center. So we're in Trenton helping inner city kids get opportunities to wrestle and be mentored. And so whenever I'm not doing neurosurgery, I'm coaching wrestling.
I love that. And would you like to share the title of your book?
My book's title is Cognitive Dominance: A Brain Surgeon's Quest to Outthink Fear.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. It's very powerful. And Tony, what would you like to know us to know about you? And again, you can include hobbies and the title of your book.
Sure. My book is called Finding Purpose, A Neurosurgeon's Journey of Hope and Healing. And I would say that learning from others, how to serve others, is one thing that I've learned. But I often say that as you go through the journey of life, is having that ability to pause and really reevaluate where you are, is because I must say that being a physician is hard. And what you do as an advocate for us all is a really important thing.
Well, thank you. And would you like to share your hobby or you're still doing your running?
Yeah. I'm a ultra runner, but I also have had the opportunity to fish, and I would say that being a crab fisherman in the Bering Sea has taught me more about teamwork, more about connecting at the heart. And more importantly, I often say that if we can do on a crab deck in the operating room, healthcare would be a lot safer.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And you touch on that in your book, right?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I do. I do remember that, and I also love it that already you've both spoken to serving, and you might be familiar with Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, who's written a couple books, and she also wrote an article helping fixing serving. And
Mhm.
me as a physical therapist, or what you're saying, I feel that you understand that deeply. Like if we look at it like we're helping people, it's kind of putting ourselves above them or that we're trying to fix them and they're not broken. But if we're looking that we're trying to serve others, that just that language or coming with that intention makes a difference. And I think you both understand that deeply. So I like it that you've already shared that. And Mark, would you like to share the title from our, where it's kind of like a book celebration, but a double book
Exactly.
celebration because we came out with White Coat's Courageous Hearts last year, and Tony wrote a chapter in that book, and we more recently came out with White Coat's Human Hearts. And you, Mark, have written a chapter in this book. So I was wondering if you'd like to share the title of your chapter and what you hope our audience will learn by reading it.
Sure. My chapter was on how to become unburnoutable. And it's something that I've learned over the last few years, particularly, I've been a neurosurgeon now for 25 years. And I realized that, I may not be able to be a neurosurgeon for another 25 years. I'm going to shoot for it. But what I've really come to appreciate is, so many of the things in medicine we allow to interfere with the context of our life. As doctors, we choose to become servants. That's what I like to call the context of your life. And sometimes we let the contents of our life affect the contents, and we shouldn't affect the context. And so what I mean by that is that, there are things in medicine that maybe aren't as glamorous, they're not as enjoyable as getting that hug from the patient, as seeing someone get better, as getting that tumor out right away. That's such immediate gratification and it feels great. And maybe going to a big clinic or having a whole stack of charts to dictate, or being on call is something that we think of as not fun, challenging, not enjoyable. But I think if you can flip your mindset and really understand that it's all part of service, especially now, I've just started in my 25th year now in neurosurgery to start a loving call. I love call because it's the time when I'm most needed in someone's
Mhm.
life. And it's the least amount of paperwork you need to do, and it's the least amount of, rigmarole. It's really like, okay, you need surgery, you need it now. We're going to take you to the operating room, or I need to talk to a family about someone who I can't do surgery for. And then clinic, think of clinic. We think of this big long list of patients. Oh, I got to go through this whole. Every one of those patients has taken their day off for you. They hang on every word you say. You are the person of the day for them. If you take on that attitude, you understand that, wow, what a special privilege it is for me to be in this clinic. And then lastly, in the one charts I'm still working on is really when I have charts to dictate, oftentimes I have a scribe with me, and most of those scribes are pre-med students. And so it's a great teaching opportunity to give them some lessons on vocabulary choice, on order of how you present somebody, how you can take a really complex patient and really boil them down to 3 or 4 sentences in a paragraph. And if you can take that one nugget that could be maybe something challenging if you're doing it alone, but if you can take it and share it with a younger person and get them up to speed, it's tremendous. I mean, I've had my scribes that are now in medical school say, "Oh my gosh," people look at my reports and they're like, "How did you know how to do that?" And they say because they spent a year with us at Princeton Brain and Spine and orthopedics. And so I take those 3 things that can sometimes really bring you down, and you can flip them in your mind and weave them into the context of your life.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. And we need doctors to stay in medicine. So I so appreciate that you're still doing it and you're going to try to keep doing it. And do you do a lot with ergonomics? I've recently been speaking with a physician who really focuses on ergonomics, especially for surgeons and dentists to just optimize, your positioning and all the things related to that.
Boy, I wish I did more of that, particularly now with those loops that are right angle loops, so people can look
Yeah.
straight ahead and work. I never got those early on, and so I haven't used them. I do use the microscope. It eases your the pain on your neck when you're working. But something very important, a very good point. Maybe Tony can comment on how that's changed. He has a few less gray hairs than me, so maybe you have a little
No, no,
better
I'm,
insight on
Mark,
ergonomics.
I'm old guy too, but
So yeah, so I'm gonna have to have her on very soon to speak to ergonomics for doctors and surgeons and
No,
dentists. So Tony, anything you'd like to respond to what Mark said? And also,
sure.
Mark, I did want to share that I love it that you talked about a loving call, and it brings to mind Dr. Apoorv Gupta, who's working with a loving organization. It's a nonprofit, and he's trying to impact systems change, but using that word love. So, because we was mentioned about us wanting doctors, like we need doctors to stay in medicine. So the system does need to change, and there are individual things doctors can do to shore themselves up, including like mindset. So it all matters. So, Tony, what would you like to
Yeah.
add?
Yeah, because is the one thing that I always teach is staying in that perpendicular plane. And so if you're like writing or reading, is I think people get tired if they're sort of torquing their neck or and so I always teach the residents in the operating room that staying in that perpendicular plane. And if you have to see around angles, it's a lot easier to manipulate the bed or room and such. But yeah, yeah. But yes. So the um, so my chapter was you have to connect at the heart. And for me is what I learned as one goes through the journey of life. You have to listen, you have to learn, you have to heal. And what I mean by that is listening. Everyone has our own story. Our stories aren't unique, but it's really how you learn from it. But most importantly is you can learn from it, but you have to move past that and you have to heal. And the formula that I use is if you're an elite physician, elite scholar, elite anything you do, I often say is performance equals skill minus interference. And what I mean by that is you can actually have all the skill, but if you can't block out your interference, whatever that is, if you're not mentally prepared, if you're not mentally well, if you're not happy and satisfied, if you're not doing purposeful work, if you're not in healthy relationships, if you're not showing compassion towards yourself, it's very difficult for you to perform at your best. And I often say, as physicians, we're perfectionists at heart. And so, really having that compassion is really important.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And Tony and I connected through his book. I had started reading Kevin MD articles, and I had recently lost, my doctor to suicide,
Mhm.
and Tony speaks to that in his own book. And I wrote you, a message, and you wrote back, and we had a call, and I was just so glad you're okay. And that's how we kept communicating, and how you were one of my first guests. So you
Yeah,
shared, like such a powerful story in your book and in our episode. And then the next year was when I met Mark. And then Mark, in our episode, he also shares a very powerful story about a pediatric neurosurgery
yeah.
case. And the patient's name
Uh-huh.
was Anthony, right? So
Right, right. Yeah, 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 yeah.
and
Right. Yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
and your stories are both so powerful. So, Mark, if there's anything you'd like to add to what Tony shared, and then my next question was going to be behind the precision, the pressure, and the performance. There are stories that most physicians never tell out loud, and I say all the time that every time a doctor shares their story, another doctor feels less alone. And I just wanted to ask you both why you think it's so important for doctors to share their stories, as you're both willing to do and be both vulnerable.
Sure. You want me to
Go
Yeah,
address
right
that
ahead.
first?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
Go
first of
for it,
all,
Mark.
Tony, I use that same formula that you say with my wrestlers. That's you got to eliminate interference. How do we do that?
Hmm.
We do that with rules, routines, and rituals. And the rules of neurosurgery are, I remember Dr. Janetta, first thing he taught me was never cut what you can't see. That was like when you close the scissors of those blades, you better know exactly what's between those two blades. And I always found it very interesting that the word decision comes from decidere, which it means to cut. So when you make a decision in your life, you're cutting away or you're cutting something and you're making a change. So decisions are important. Um, but I think with regards to the sharing, Kim, if I hadn't shared my story about Anthony LaCourie, the worst case of my whole career wouldn't have turned out to become the best case of my whole career. Once I shared it and I got other people's perspectives and I realized I was telling myself one piece of reality, not the whole story, it totally flipped my mindset and I became a much better doctor. And I wouldn't trade that experience that I had for the world. So sharing and I think Tony, you talk about this in your book. I haven't read your book yet, but I read the preview, and it's really about how healing self-expression is. That it's really critical to be able to express yourself. When I finished my book, the person who learned the most from that book was me, 100% me. And it made me a way better listener. It made me value relationships more. It gave me a better worldview on my whole career and my whole life and my family. So sharing, that's the way we do this. I love this one quote from Laurence Olivier. When you see a good actor, you see a performance, but when you see a great actor, you see yourself. And really, the more you are yourself, the more loving you are and the more effective you are in what you do. So sharing is being vulnerable. Sharing is really
Yeah.
speaking what's on your mind and not pussyfooting around what you need to say and getting things out there that need to be said. So I think the more direct you are, more open and honest and timely. When you see something and something pops in your head, and you say, I really should say something, say it. Say it right then and there from your perspective. Because again, you're only seeing one perspective. You may not see the whole picture, but it's critically important. Self-expression is very healing.
Yeah, and what I would add is we learn most from what others, and for me, is I can honestly say that when I came forward with my story in 2016, my wife never wanted me to say anything about it. But I can honestly say that I've changed more lives lecturing and going through my story because it gives people the opportunity to pause. Because oftentimes, as we go through the journey of life, we sort of climb, 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 and we never step back. And like you said, Mark, is I must say that I am who I am today because taking care of various patients have taught me a lot about living, a lot about life, a lot about faith, um, and um, and it and as a community, we need to help each other. We need to serve each other. And those stories resonate very, very deeply because it tells people that you're not alone.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So when I interviewed Mark, we titled that interview Never Worry About a Patient Alone.
Okay.
And if he had taken that advice that someone had given him, he might have not have suffered so deeply for like 15, 16 years, right? So
Right.
that's those
Del
messages.
Rousseau.
Go ahead.
Del Rousseau taught me that was another rule of neurosurgery. Never worry about a patient alone. Never worry about anything alone.
Yeah, and that's so important. And I know Tony that you struggled for a while, right? Alone and until you sought help or came out with your story. So one of you writes in our books about connecting at the heart, that would be Tony, and the other about becoming unburnoutable, which is Mark. And I'll ask you next, when did you each realize that pushing harder wasn't the answer anymore?
Go
Mark?
ahead, Tom.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, I would say that having the ability to recharge, um, um, I think as neurosurgeons, we strive very, very hard. We actually work very, very hard. But it comes to a place where you're not performing at your best. And what I've learned through the years, having that ability to recharge. And I often say is that you have to train your body, you have to train your craft, and you have to train your mind. What I mean by that is, being able to train your body, and I would argue that sleep is one of the most important things that you can do. Two is how you train your craft and really how you acquire knowledge through stories, how you learn. And then last is how you train your mind is because I think having that ability to pause and staying in the present. And my faith plays a big role. And you just have to let the journey of life unfold. And it's a lot easier said than done because as neurosurgeons, you climb, and then it comes to a point where you're not doing your best. And so having the ability to step back and recharge.
For me, um, I don't I don't know what pushing too hard is. I know that when I'm not at my best, I'm not integrating my life together. So, I mean, I'm a doctor 24/7, 365. I'm sure Tony, you are too. Like if I'm on vacation and my friend calls me and they've got, had a severe sudden onset headache, I'm immediately getting them to the ER and making the
Right.
phone calls. And when I was younger, I used to get annoyed when there was medical calls that would creep into my vacation. I'd be like, "God, I need a break. I can't believe don't. And then I finally just said, look, that's like building a sandcastle when the tide's coming in. It's never going to happen. The better job you do, the more you're a doctor, the more people are going to need you. And so you need to, for me, I just sort of integrated it. You know, I've learned that I don't have weekends. I have some days that I have office hours. I have some days that I don't have office hours, but I don't have weekends. I don't have nights off. I don't go on vacation. I change zip codes sometimes. I end up getting a change of scenery. And yes, sometimes that's refreshing for me, but it's worked really well for me because years ago I'd come back from vacation and I'd have this false sense that I was really rested. And then three
Yeah.
days later, I'd feel the same like I did, the day before I left for vacation. Instead of just letting it all integrate together. Doesn't mean you don't. I'm not saying don't don't take breaks. I'm not saying don't get a good night's sleep. Those are really important aspects of your life. But knowing that you bring yourself everywhere. I bring the doctor to the wrestling practice. I bring the wrestling coach to the doctor's office has helped me a lot not need a lot of rest. I mean, yes, it's important to rest and it's important to get your sleep, but I don't need that much because I'm not living in a state of cognitive dissonance. I'm living really true to who I want to be. I'm not sure if I articulated it as well as I'd
Yeah.
like to, but I think if you're really loving what you do,
Yeah.
you don't need a
Yeah.
lot of breaks.
Yeah.
Time just
Yeah.
passes.
Yeah. Because, the one thing, Mark, that resonates with me is what you actually said prior is because call is one of the most burdensome things that we can do. And flipping the narrative, not, getting called and all this stuff, but flipping the narrative that someone needs you. And what you just said, really resonates because when I talk about well-being and wellness, it's not working less. it's being more efficient, being able to say no, and doing things that you would like to do. But most importantly, that serving others is one of the most protective things of burnout is having meaning. And as long as you're having that meaning and serving others, I personally think that you can work as hard as you want.
Right, right,
Mhm.
right.
Well,
Now, I'm
well,
not saying after a really stressful, hard, emergency pediatric trauma that you don't need to have some downtime. That you definitely need to have some
Oh, sure.
downtime.
Yeah,
Um, but it's not, you don't need a lot if you're living in with an integrated life.
right, right.
well, and it's also what pausing and recharging means to any individual, right? So sometimes for Tony, the pausing and recharging could be when he does his the fishing or when he's doing
Yeah.
his running, right? And then for Mark when he's coaching wrestling, because you'd think, oh my gosh, aren't you exhausted? Like, how do you have the energy to go do that? But if
Right.
that's what it's what feeds anyone and things that might be exhausting like I've barely ever ran 2 miles. Tony runs like I can't even fathom that, right? But so it's like what could exhaust one person recharges another. So part of it is knowing and understanding like what recharges you and what
Right.
pausing is for you.
Yes.
So, as we'll be starting to wind down, what messages? So, I also just read a book by another physician, Dr. Varun Kapila, and he wrote a book about leadership. And it's a short, simple book because he wanted people to read it. And he shares early on that he had imposter syndrome as he was asked to be a leader or put in leadership situations. And he wasn't as effective as a leader as he could have been because of his own imposter syndrome. And I love the way he was willing to describe it in detail in the book so that other doctors can see themselves. Well, oh yeah, like that, and you can name it like imposter syndrome, and I'm the nice to call it imposterism because it's not really a syndrome, like it's something that happens, and that when he's sharing that or even as a leader that it's important to celebrate. So just like all of those little things in that book, like I love that as a surgeon, again, he's willing to, share his stories and talk about that. And I feel like all doctors are leaders, but sometimes they'll say, I'm just a this, or I'm just, like he even puts that in the book. Like at one point he thought, well, I'm just a surgeon. And one doctor might have said to me once, I'm just a pulmonologist, right? Or said, where I'm like, my gosh, you save people's lives. Like you're never, just a doctor. So I would like what messages are on your heart right now that you would like to share with your colleagues?
Tony,
So one
why don't you go?
is have the ability to pause every month, reevaluate where you are, but really showing compassion towards your self when something doesn't go when something doesn't go as you think it should go, is having the ability to step back and pause. And really, I mean, having the ability to treat yourself kindly and learn from it, but really heal from it too.
Yeah.
Excellent. I would, I guess, my parting message, I think, would be um, ask yourself where fear exists in your life,
Mm.
and then ask some really hard questions, some challenging questions about why you have that fear. And also be very mindful of your words. We use words like I'm uncomfortable, I'm anxious, I'm worried. Those are all words of fear. They all have some underlying fear because I believe fear is the most corrosive substance on earth, and it impedes our ability to do what we need to do. It diminishes our effectiveness and it erodes the quality of our life. So if you can just figure out ways to dismantle your fear, you're going to love what you do more. I tell the story about, getting ready to do a difficult occipital craniotomy on a patient. And just before I'm about to go into the hospital, I get a message that my father has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And the last thing I wanted to do at that moment was go in and operate. And I was very worried that I was not going to perform well. And after kind of dealing with it and thinking about it and analyzing it and tearing it apart and breaking it down, I started thinking about my father. I started thinking about all the things that he taught me and what he would want me to do in that type of a situation. And instead of canceling the surgery, I dedicated the surgery to my father. And by dismantling that fear, I loved my father more. I loved my patient more, and I love what I do more. And that's what caused me to go take that person to the OR and do that surgery and do, one of the best surgeries I've ever done. And then go see my father, even though it was challenging for me by dismantling the fear, reminding myself of who I am and the oath that I took as a servant. It caused me to perform at my best. So my message would be, whatever you're afraid of, start picking it apart, dissect it, and analyze and understand it's an event that exists in the future. It's not something in the present moment, and it's not. If you understand that it's in the future, and you're not afraid of feeling what you're going to feel, then the fear diminishes and the real you comes out, and that's when you're at your very best.
Yeah, because uh, I often say, Mark, fear is face everything and respond.
That's a great acronym to remember. And
Yes.
we're winding down, I believe there's something I probably haven't shared on a podcast before, but through everything that happened to me, I did a lot of ruminating for a couple of years. And like people might have told you, like if you had a complication, you did the best job you could with the information you had at the time. But for me personally, and maybe for you guys, sometimes that just didn't work because you're like me. I'm smart. Like I should have known better or I should have done differently. So I wanted to give a shout out to my physician coach, Dr. Michael Hirsch, because through our conversations, he said to me, well, of course you weren't trying to sabotage yourself. And for me, that changed everything because, in that sense, he was right. So it's similar to saying you did the best job with the information you had at the time. But for some reason, that wasn't landing with me. But the way he said that, so that I hope for like you guys or any doctor or surgeon listening, that to think that for yourself. Like, of course, you weren't trying to sabotage yourself for the patient. Like, you really did do the best. So just like changing those words a little. So, do you guys have like a take-home action message in like one or two sentences for our audience, Mark?
I think I said it all.
What I would say is we must learn to listen, to learn, and to heal together. And I must say, Kim, you're a remarkable individual because you creating communities where physicians can recharge, reflect, and reconnect really ultimately helps us provide better care for all. And so thank you for what you do.
Yeah, Kim, you are remarkable. Thank you for, being a voice for us.
Mhm.
Well, thank you. To hear that from both of you just fills my whole heart and brings tear to my eyes because both of you are remarkable and you fill my heart every time we have a conversation. So I'm grateful to both of you. And just thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedules. How lucky am I and fortunate to have, the two neurosurgeons in different areas of the country, right? To get you available at the same time. So I'm very grateful for that. And if today's conversation resonated with you, please like and subscribe, and you'll find more stories like this in our White Coats book series. And for those who feel called to go deeper, we'll be gathering this October at our inaugural physician retreat and would be honored to have you join us. Links are in the show notes, including how to reach out to our guests. And please reach out if you're interested in sponsoring one or more episodes. It truly sustains this work. More information about sponsorship is also in the show notes. And in closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Fantastic, Kim. Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. You're welcome.